everyone, and welcome back to Decoding the Digital Lab with CSols. Today, we're diving into a critical topic for our friends in the Canadian oil and gas sector. The year 2025 is shaping up to be, well, let's just say uncertain. I'm your host, Megan Pettyjohn, and with me today to unpack all of this is Kyle McDuffie, Canadian-born CEO of CSols, North America's leading laboratory informatics consultancy. Welcome to the show, Kyle.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks for having me. I would agree with your initial assessment that it's a very interesting time, a small understatement, for Canadian oil and gas producers. I was born and raised in Saskatchewan, so pretty familiar with the heavy oil industry there. Also spent a number of years, 10 years, working in the Alberta petrochemical sector. So pretty familiar with the sort of cyclical nature of this business, the need for capital investment, and the macroeconomic sort of things that can affect this business. I was reading a Deloitte report recently, basically said 2024 was a very strong year for this sector, but that 2025 now is cautious. So in addition to that, we've been working CSols Canada in this sector since 2010.
Now, Kyle, we've been hearing a lot about the outlook for Canadian oil and gas producers in 2025. On one hand, we're seeing some exciting news with the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion and the upcoming LNG Canada facility. Can you break down what that means for Canadian producers?
Right. So both those projects have been in play for a number of years, both the construction and the go-live of the LNG terminal in British Columbia is supposed to be later this year. So that really opens up the potential for the Asia-Pacific market for Canadian exports. So it's a really good opportunity for Canadian producers to expand their markets, new customers, and additional capacity. So that's basically a big opportunity there. Unfortunately, right now, there's also other things going on to be concerned about.
Part of that sounds like a major win. There's also a potential downside on the horizon with the U.S. tariffs. How significant of a challenge are those likely to be?
Well, your guess is good in mine, Megan, but it's pretty clear that the turbulence of the last 3 or 4 months with the Trump administration policies around tariffs was unexpected. So at the bare minimum is a high level of uncertainty at the moment as to what the impacts might be. Historically, the U.S. has been a major market for Canadian oil and gas, and definitely the demand could be dampened based on increased costs for American use of Canadian customers. So it's uncertain how long this will last, how much the tariffs will be. Will it be 10%? Will they be more? Will it be impacted by the new Liberal government in Canada? So it could be a short-term problem. It could be a long-term problem, so it's hard to say. So producers are wise at the moment to look at diversifying their customer base.
And that diversification isn't as simple as just shipping the same product to a new location, is it?
No, absolutely not. So every country has their own specifications regarding oil and gas products and related. It also impacts the downstream products as well. And so they have very specific needs and very specific specifications based on that market. So that's going to make things a lot more complex for the laboratory side of things, which is usually given the job of verifying the suitability of the products for the particular markets and or customers. So that means that laboratories are going to have to do maybe additional testing that they weren't doing before, but certainly a much wider variety of specifications to deal with, maybe testing requirements, quality assurance needs from the various governments of those areas. So it means a more rigorous and varied testing regime based on these new potential customers that we may want to pursue.
Okay, well, that perfectly leads us into the core of our discussion today, and that's the strategic imperative of investing in or enhancing a laboratory information management system, or also known as a LIMS, in this current climate. For our listeners who might not be deeply familiar, Can you give us a quick overview of what a LIMS is and why it's so crucial for oil and gas labs?
Absolutely, Megan. So LIMS have been around for a number of years, and they're pretty much a major requirement of any uh, organizations that's making these type of products in large volumes on a day-to-day basis and shipping them around the world. So it's an established software system that most people have. So the purpose of it is to manage and track samples of various parts of the process. Could be raw materials, could be in-process materials, could be finished goods, could be environmental monitoring related, could be safety and industrial hygiene related. So it's really a bunch of manages the complex testing requirements, the data, the people who are doing the testing, the specifications, all of that. That's basically what a LIMS is.
We're hearing that now is the time for a LIMS project. Can you elaborate on why this particular moment in the Canadian oil and gas landscape makes a LIMS investment so critical?
Right. So as I said earlier, most people have either a first generation or second generation LIMS. So it may not be that this is a new facility, a new installation. It could be that this is enhancement to what's already existing. So several factors would be driving this. First, as we talked about, opportunity to do increased production and diversification into new markets will mean more volume and more complex testing. Secondly, even though there's a push to clean energy, the expectation is still that oil and gas will grow up to about 2030. And that probably means that there'll be stricter regulations around production, quality, environmental, things of that nature, also related to the greenhouse gas pollution caps and all of that stuff. So there's a lot of things that are going to need to be done. Lastly, this is a low margin business, high volume, low margin. So more needs to be done with less people. Only way to do that is to deploy technology. Some examples might be automation, predictive analytics, AI tools, statistical quality control, statistical process control. As a bare minimum, we would expect that the sort of tariff environment will provide margin pressure, which means each of the producers will have to do more with less. It's a perfect reason to invest in technology like a LIMS.
So it's not just about the tariffs, it's a confluence of factors driving the need for more robust lab management.
Exactly. And as I've said a couple of times now, it's all about efficiency, right? It's all about doing more with less. And so it's not the kind of an environment where you can add a whole bunch of people and that's going to make a difference. So we're really talking about investment in more powerful technology systems. And typically a LIMS acts as the central hub for all laboratory generated data, which then is typically integrated with other systems, which might be process management type systems, could be, typically supports AI type predictive analytics, statistical process control, and just generally overall standardized IT solutions so that the lab fits within the overall context of the business.
So, what are some of the key advantages that modern LIMS technology offers, especially compared to older systems or even manual processes?
So as you know, there's a big effort going on around the world about moving to software SaaS solutions versus on-prem and things of that nature. So the traditional systems were localized in nature, either on a plant-by-plant basis or potentially on a regional basis. So some of it is the underlying technology. Some of it is really just new functionality. So over the past 10 years, LIMS have evolved and to incorporate additional capabilities that maybe didn't exist before. So if you have a plant that was built maybe 5, 7, 10, 20 years ago, it may have a LIMS system that is 5, 10 years old. So that's a long time in the technology world. So what are the kind of things that you could do if you wish to? Well, there's cloud-based options, which I talked about, which give you, more flexibility around accessibility and scalability. There's enhanced data analytics functionality, mobile accessibility if you need that, to be able to do remote sampling anywhere, for example, that you might need to. enhanced integration with other critical systems like ELNs and instruments, and also things like process control environments. These advancements will potentially impact the increasing demands and complexity that we've been discussing so far.
Can you give us some examples of how these benefits translate into tangible improvements in an oil and gas lab setting?
Right. So typically, or just think about the way it could be. So in a lot of environments, still there's multiple steps, multiple manual steps. But if we're able to improve the process controls segment, meaning we can get better, less rework going on by incorporating lab data and process control data and presenting that to operations personnel in a continuous updating dashboard. Think about things like that. So the operator who is running the plant, wherever that may be, or if they're a terminal, wherever that is, that they can see exactly what's happening. In addition to that, within the laboratory world itself, we can automate routine workflows to eliminate manual errors and free up analyst time by doing that. Can provide automated notifications of unusual results. We can provide a repository that engineering personnel can use coupled with process information in order to optimize the process. So that's three possible options, and the list goes on from there.
Now, we understand that the process of investing in a new LIMS or upgrading an existing one can be daunting, especially considering the costs and the potential disruptions. What would you say to those who might be hesitant?
Well, what I'd say to those who might be hesitant is it's a valid concern. It has to be properly planned and implemented, definitely. However, the long-term return on investment from a properly implemented LIMS system in terms of increased efficiency, improved data quality, integrity, compliance, and ultimately saving money far outweighs the initial costs and the disruptions.
And we've heard about the possibility of phasing the implementation. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. So typically, as I said, most people, unless it's a brand new greenfield facility, already have some sort of LIMS system. So phasing basically means looking at the value that you're going to get from the new system and deploying that in a series of steps based on that value definition. That's the way that you can maximize the value and minimize the effort. For example, typically certain types of samples and tests are more valuable to the corporation than others. Classic example would be finished goods. So the part that's going out to the customer needs to have the certificate of analysis to be correct, still a thing that is very important. So that would be an example where you might start with that first and work backwards through the in-process materials, raw materials, and so on, which are of lesser immediate value. That's an example of a phasing that you might do.
Finally, for our Canadian listeners who are considering a LIMS project, what kind of support and expertise should they be looking for in a partner?
Great question, Megan. So it's crucial to partner with a provider who's done it before. So I would say that's important. In addition to that, there are unique requirements for the Canadian market, and there are specific functionality that is useful to deploy for the oil and gas industry. So a good partner would not only have the technical expertise in whatever LIMS you picked and the other systems that you might want to integrate it to, that would be good. But it would also be good to have a strong understanding of the regulatory landscape in particular provinces that you're working with, which are different, and also the specific challenges and opportunities that face Canadian producers. Can be useful to have local presence, particularly if you're doing stuff in Quebec. Good to have some French-speaking people there, or that you maybe need time zone support in the Mountain Time Zone in Alberta area. So that also can be useful. So bottom line is, someone who knows what they're doing, done it before, understands the Canadian specifics, and can provide local presence and support if you really need it.
Kyle, considering your deep experience in the Canadian oil and gas sector, what's one key tip you'd offer our listeners who want to achieve excellence amidst these uncertainties?
So there's two key words that you said. One is uncertainties, and we think that those are going to continue for foreseeable future. And second word you said was excellence. So that I believe are the two key things that you need to stay top of mind. So in my humble opinion, it's critical to stay focused on the execution of your long-term business objectives, not getting distracted by the day-to-day news coming out of Washington, D.C. Doesn't mean you should put your head in the sand and ignore what's going on. Nope, I'm not saying that. But I am saying that you need to pay attention to what your current clients and your potential future clients really need. Deliver with excellence against those needs, and you'll be fine.
Kyle, this has been incredibly insightful. It's clear that while uncertainty might be the word of the moment in the Canadian oil and gas sector, a strategic investment in a LIMS can provide a solid foundation for navigating those challenges and fueling future efficiency and success. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
My pleasure, Megan.
Well, that's all the time we have today. Please join us next time on Decoding the Digital Lab with CSols for more insights into the world of laboratory informatics.